Folks, good afternoon to all of you, and I very much thank you for being here as we've come today to honor John. As sad and sudden as all this news has been to us, I feel, I think a lot like you do, sad, but knowing how important it is to be together this afternoon to honor him and both pray and think such wonderful memories of his life. Right, Jay Bear?
Yeah.
Exactly. So again, I thank you, and without further ado, John has a couple of dear friends, Marty Dunn and Walt Clements, who are going to actually lead our service to honor John this afternoon.
My supplies. Put this up here somehow. There you go. I could hide behind it if we need it. Wow, I thought I would take a minute. Well, on behalf of everyone dear to John, thank you all for coming. Thank you to the Millville Police Department for your presence. And for those of you who are here out of respect of knowing someone who knew John or knew him lightly, take a few moments and look at this board. You will see a reflection of John. Okay, let's see if I can break away from this. I grew up in Newark, in the Newark area. I was born and raised there, and I'm not boasting about that, just putting some perspective. And I never heard of places such as Malaga and Buena. But 48 years ago, I applied for a police opening in what I believe was a town named Millville in far northern New Jersey, up in Sussex County. Yeah, right. When the interview packet arrived, I discovered that there was another Millville, and that's the one that you're all familiar with. It was on November 5th, 1973, when I first met John Olah. On that day, 9 of us took the oath of office to become police officers. The following week, we began preliminary training as foot patrol officers with a goal of improving police-community relations. That's interesting for any of you that might have viewed some of the rhetoric that exists today and the continued improving that we may or may not need. But we were focused on improving it in the downtown district, and we were all assigned to foot patrol. And if any of us were influenced by watching television cop shows, it wasn't to come down and become foot patrol officers, where we walk 24-hour shifts, or shifts 24 hours a day. Most of us were in our early 20s, and 6 of us relocated from other places. So thus began the process of learning how to become modern police officers, while also learning how to become adults. And I'm not sure if I achieved that even yet. I should mention that many of the officers we were joining ranks with were the ages of our parents. Some actually had children who were older than us. So just as what occurs in high school, we found ourselves seeking out places to land and people to associate with who had similar interests as us. Our assignment of forging a change in policing was not met with open arms by everyone in the police department. But that did not discourage John. To him, what was right, and there were no excuses for not doing right. John never engaged in self-promotion as some of us did. By the way, how do you like this tie? It's much better than what you're going to see Walt wearing. No, he just did what was necessary and was okay with not getting acknowledged. John was aware that his necessary behavior would often result in retaliatory action. if he stepped on the toes of people in power who didn't like it. But that didn't deter him. There's been a lot of media focus on what a hero is. A hero is not a professional athlete who makes a good play, or a person who died doing something illegal. A hero is someone who does the right thing, knowing there is serious personal risk. Emphasis on right thing. John's focus on doing right earned him the title of being the leader of the Subversive Officers Association and the retaliation that came with that. It resulted in a few unfavorable assignments and being passed over on a promotion or two. But unlike some of his fellow subversive group members, myself especially, John didn't pack up and leave with hurt feelings. He stayed the course, and doing so allowed him to accomplish as much good as those with less ethical resistors would allow. He met each disappointment with more determination, eventually reaching the rank of captain and second in command in the Millville Police Department. He had earned numerous honors from those who recognized him outside of the police department, an honor that is reserved for the highest distinction within the Police Benevolent Association, and that is a gold life card, was awarded to John. He was Police Officer of the Year, I believe, more than once. This is one of the times I had the honor of presenting the plaque to him, and various other honors that were bestowed upon him, most of which embarrassed him. You know, I often ponder what good comes from people going out of their way to harm others, and what impact that has on the person being harmed in health and emotional ways. Helping other people was the hallmark of not only his career, but John's life. During the 13 years that I was able to work and play with him, I can attest to numerous examples of his efforts to make life better for less privileged children and other individuals in the community. John was always there to volunteer to take groups of kids to ball games and other outings. As uncomfortable as he was speaking to groups, he applied that hero instinct and served on committees designed to help the general public. And when the time came to perform the actual labor associated with the decisions made from those committees, he was first in line to carry them out, when many other committee members felt that their duties were served once they made the recommendations. He helped raise funds for charities and willingly carried out any job necessary to complete the charitable event. To make it clear, I'm speaking of volunteer work he was not compensated for. We wouldn't have enough time for me to actually speak of the contributions he made as a police officer. John exhibited those traits soon after I met him, way back in 1973. And I hesitate to confess, while my daughters are listening, that John beat me at almost everything we competed at, something none of them do. From pinball to video games, to playing golf and riding motorcycles, with John, I came in second. And when it came to playing pranks, something I pride myself on. Some of you might have notes taped on the back of you right now when I hug you. I knew it was best not to break the truce John and I had, if I would regret doing so. So thus began a friendship that lasted almost 5 decades. John was chosen as the godfather of one of my daughters, and agreed. Of course, Suzanne was the godmother. And coincidentally, Faith, that daughter, followed John's lead and has risen to the rank of captain in the Richmond Police Department in Virginia. Dang. I often wonder what kind of vacations my family would be taking on a yacht if John had been a rock star instead. I apologize for the humor, but I won't be able to talk at all if I stay focused on the other topics. My relationship with John not only passed the time of test, but also one of distance. I left Millville for greener pastures after 13 years, moving back above the Mason-Dixon line, and eventually all the way to New Hampshire 19 years ago. And although we didn't see each other as frequently as we did during the early years, our friendship strengthened rather than weakening. Those of you who became close with John in more recent years likely made similar character assessments as I'm alluding to. As a matter of fact, I will share something from just a week ago. John told me he brought his riding lawnmower to the shop for repairs. The logical thinker that I am caused me to ask, why do you own a riding lawnmower? You have a house built on a postage stamp. You can cut the lawn with a pair of scissors. Why bother getting something repaired that you really don't need? John's reply, I have 4 neighbors less able than I who depend on me to cut their lawns. 48 years later, and he was still at it, helping people. I hope others step up now and provide the support and assistance that Suzanne will need in the coming months. The test of time and distance also involved Walt Clements, who's going to speak a few words following me. I should say Dr. Clements. John and I always saw the irony with Walt not being considered qualified to be a detective in the Millville Police Department because of his do-right attitude and subversive membership in our club. Then he was hired by the FBI and later earned a PhD. He too chased greener pastures, and he too maintained a friendship with John and I. Although both Walt and I are here today, we agreed years ago that we would rather each of us put forth an effort to spend time with one another while we were alive than to drop everything to attend our funeral or visit us at a nursing home. I'm happy we followed through with that plan and enjoyed as much time with John as reasonable. We got together regularly at family gatherings or career milestones, and we never passed up the opportunity to divert our travels a couple of 100 miles to see each other. I encourage you to ponder that goal with your loved ones. Don't pass up an opportunity to spend time with people you care about. The women we chose to spend our lives with agreed and fully supported that plan. Thank you, Shelley, Winky, and Suzanne. My family takes vacations in Ocean City every July, and we did so last week. Traffic on the Parkway is brutal on Saturdays heading south because of the check-ins on that day. My wife and I were planning on driving to John and Suzanne's house on Friday and spending the night to make the drive easier the next day. We already had 7 or 8 hours behind us before we got to the Parkway. Thursday, John called to advise us Suzanne was in the hospital having her appendix removed. I'm not bound by HIPAA regulations, so I'm talking about this. Yikes. I was going to say a great granny having her appendix removed, but I know she'd be embarrassed by that. And at the time, John was also juggling that with the delivery of numerous food items that Suzanne had prepared for a gathering later that day. So he's running back and forth to the hospital. He's delivering these things, and Shelley and I just recognized this isn't happening because no one would expect our invitation to be intact. This was run across Suzanne's desk, and she said, "No way, you're coming." We figured, what the heck? But what the heck is that allowed me to spend some critical one-to-one time with John, where we reflected on some of the events we built our friendship on. We didn't always get into all of that, but this time we did. It was a nice exchange of many happy memories, some of which I cannot speak of at this gathering. But wait, there's more. In the spirit of seeing each other whenever possible, we had a tradition that during our week in Ocean City, we would spend an evening at the Olah reception hall, as it became known because of the all-inclusive parties that they put off, for us anyway, where John would serve up his signature crabs and clams and Sue other foods. And quite interesting, I have 2 gluten-free daughters, a vegan wife, a vegetarian daughter, and then just other people that are picky, plain and simple. Always had plenty of food for them. My group involved my 4 daughters, their mates, and 7 grandchildren, 3 of them 4 and under. 15 of us in total. Suzanne just had her appendix removed. I know there's some of you out there now that if you knew that was about to happen, you would call your doctor and say it's time for elective surgery and get out of that. Not Suzanne. Again, she insisted we not cancel the vacation, and in fact, they arranged for Johnny to be there to spend time with us. Jay Bear. I wish to conclude with 2 statements I've heard at funerals. I wish I could have seen him one more time. And he was like a brother to me. Well, I will continue to wish I could see him one more time. But I'm grateful I saw him last week. As for the brother thing, I chose John. He was much more than a brother to me. In all the years that I've known John, I never had a disparaging thought about him, and we never argued in anger. I'm truly fortunate to have known him, and I will miss him greatly. Thank you.
I get the impression that I'm better at electronics. My wife Winky put this on a laptop for me, or I wouldn't be able to do this. Thanks, Marty. This is indeed tough. I want to just share a few thoughts and memories, John, and I have the honor of closing with a prayer this afternoon. But I want to start off by saying that before I say anything, I did check that the statute of limitations has expired on every story I'll tell John. So neither of us will be in trouble. I met John the same time as Marty, in November of '73 when we became policemen together. We had to drive to the academy. It wasn't one you lived at, and every morning for 3 months we drove back and forth in different cars, and John and I were always in the same car. And on the way back, we would generally be found singing Jim Stafford's song Spiders and Snakes as loud as we could whenever it came on the radio, in the back seat of the car. And some of those things just cemented that friendship. He was a groomsman at my wedding, and it was the beginning of times that he and Marty would be there for me. They helped us move 4 times in 10 years. Sometimes questionably, but they always were there. When we worked midnight to 8 shift, the police cars back then only had an AM radio. And John would bring in an FM transceiver and hook it up to the police car's radio and ask the dispatcher to leave us alone for an hour. Because Dr. Demento came on at midnight. And we would spend an hour listening to Dr. Demento songs and singing those in the car, hoping we didn't get a call. Talk about a lasting legacy. My granddaughters now sing Dr. Demento songs from hearing their pops sing it that John and I started. Just to hear them sing the song, "Love to Eat Those Mousies," takes me back to those nights on patrol. Music and John and I didn't always have a great ending. One of his favorite things was when we rode together on midnight shift was to be playing the radio and wait until I looked out the passenger window and started singing. And he would quietly reach over and shut the radio off because he knew it would take 2 or 3 notes before I realized there wasn't any music. And then he'd have to pull to his shoulder, generally on Silver Run Road or somewhere, until he stopped laughing because he couldn't drive anymore. So that music part has always kept us. I want to talk about some of the things that we did together and some funny stories, but more than that, I want to show who John was through those things. We started out running 3 miles, starting at his house on Maria Terrace, and we'd run 3 miles after 4 to 12 shift. We only survived that because Suzanne stayed up and made iced tea for us and had it waiting when we got done to 3 miles. Generally, he was dragging me up the driveway to finish. And that was a great time and a great memory, but it was more than that, because out of that came the idea to form the Cops Run for Kids Run, in which 20 Millville officers, or I think there were 10 Millville officers, ran 20 miles to raise money for the Sunshine Foundation in Philadelphia. It all came out of just 2 friends running 3 miles at night and being supplied with the great iced tea. But it was his heart that showed through that. When we were younger and starting out on foot patrol, he and I looked a lot alike in uniform. We both had hair. We were about the same height and same build, and when we were in uniform, my family would constantly come up to him on foot patrol and start asking him questions and talking to him until they realized it wasn't me. So I think that was part of the connection that kept us close, but there was more than that. If you could hear me say Cookie Monster, you know exactly what I was going to say. We loved Cookie Monster, and we loved the Cookie Monster songs and records from Sesame Street. So much so that we would go to my house or his house at 3 in the morning when we were on walking patrol and play Cookie Monster records. And to this day, even my granddaughter still love the Cookie Monster song. It just stays there. I think even Tanya remembers hearing Cookie Monster played at 3 in the morning and not know where that was coming from. One of the things that supervisors would occasionally do back in those days, if they wanted to punish you, was make you ride together, because most officers like to have their own car and be by themselves. They could go to lunch when they wanted, stop home, do whatever. So if they wanted to punish you, they'd put you together. That didn't work for us. We enjoyed that. But more than anything, John enjoyed making the sergeant think that we weren't together. And he would take the patrol car with both of us sitting in it, pull into a parking lot somewhere, And we would hand the microphone back and forth talking to each other like we were gonna meet in that parking lot. And we knew within 5 minutes the sergeant's car would come screaming into the parking lot, see us sitting in the front seats, what? Oh, you guys. We got you guys so many times just thinking that we had violated his rule. There was a time that John and I were working 4 to 12, and we had both been given brand new Fords. They hadn't been on patrol yet. We were the first two to drive those. And within a couple hours, I had backed into actually a wooden outhouse on a Kmart parking lot with mine, and dented the bumper on one side and stuck in further than the other. And I did what I always would do in trouble. I called John and said, help me get out of this. Yeah. So we met at the Buffalo Market parking lot and got out on our hands and knees and scraped all the yellow paint off the bumper with our fingernails. And our cars were sitting side by side, and sure enough, if we met anywhere or called each other to meet, the sergeant knew we were up to something and came looking for us. So we knew within a few minutes the sergeant's going to be pulling into the parking lot, and he did. It's dark, and we're down on our hands and knees behind the police car when the sergeant pulls in, and he stops and says, what are you guys doing? We said, we're just looking at the new car, Sarge. He said, wait a minute. That bumper on the left side is in further than it is on the right side. What happened to that car? Somebody that thought a lot quicker than I did got out and ran around to the back of his car and says, oh no, Sarge, my car's got that bumper like that too. They must come that way. And believe it or not, the sergeant says, oh, okay, and drove off. He rescued me once again. I knew that he would always be there for me. I knew he'd rescue me anytime I needed it. I also knew how much his family loved him and how much he loved his family. I found that once quite by accident, because we were on foot patrol and John got called to take a prisoner over to the county jail in Bridgeton, just about the time he was supposed to go home to the house on Mulberry Street for dinner. And John calls me, he says, hey, do me a favor, go to my house and tell Suzanne I'll be late for dinner because I got to go to Bridgeton. So, okay. I walked up to the house, knocked on the door, and Suzanne came to the door with this look of panic and shock on her face, ready to cry, and I'm going like, she's just going to be late for dinner. I had no concept. We were naive rookies, and I had no concept of what that looked like to have his uniformed friend coming to the door and him not be with me when he was supposed to be home. But your love showed through. Yeah. Even back then, I knew it. I could take a lifetime to tell you all the things about that man that will stay with me forever and why I love him. Even our language changed. We would eat breakfast on day shift at a little restaurant where the waitress asked us if we wanted breakfast. And from that point on, we never said the word breakfast. We always talked about breakfast. It changed the way I spoke. But I have one final. Actually, I have to share something else before that. Marty mentioned that he had left for greener pastures, and I, after 13 years, I left after 11 years from Millville to go in the Bureau and transfer to the Midwest. It was hard leaving him and not being able to see him every day as my friend. And one day, many, many years later, we were riding in his pickup truck when I was back visiting. And I said to him, you know, I've always thought about how the three amigos here, Marty and you and I were always together and doing things together and so close. I said, did it ever feel like, we kind of left you? I mean, that we left and you stayed behind? Did you ever feel like that? And he turned to me and said, well, you did. And that hurt. But then I thought, you know what? That's John. I could trust him to say what was true and how he felt and be honest with me and not worry about what I wanted to hear or what would be nice to hear. So that meant everything else I'd heard from him was true. The last thing I'm going to share here is, you love this story. We were working 4 to 12 and it was snowing really hard to the point that traffic had gotten backed up on Sharp Street between the dam and Main Street in that dip and couldn't get back up the other side. And traffic was filled up, and whatever they thought John and I could do about it, I have no idea, but we were dispatched to try and figure out how to solve that traffic problem in snow up to our knees and ice on the highway. So we got there in the police car, we got out, and we started walking to the first cars in line to see if we could figure out how to get them moving. And as we walked past a school bus full of little kids, teenagers, John's feet went out from underneath of him, and he landed on his back in the snow. His hat went flying, and that bus erupted in the laughter I've never heard. I mean, it was just hilarious. They were all screaming out the window and laughing at him, laying in the snow. And he got up. It was hard for me not to laugh too, I must admit, but he got up out of the snow and brushed the snow off himself. Got his hat out of the snow and calmly put it on his head. Never said a word. Got the snow off, and he's standing there, and he turns to the school bus full of kids that are laughing still hilariously. And he said 2 words: still cool. And turned to walk away. You may be down right now, partner, but still cool. Let me close the prayer. Father, God in heaven, we know that our grief and our pain and suffering is not lost, that you know how we feel. Your word says that blessed are those that grieve, for they shall be comforted. We need that comfort now, Lord. I ask that you give us peace, that you be with Suzanne, kids and grandkids, the whole family, Lord, the loved ones, the friends. Let us focus on the blessing that John was in our life. And I can't thank you enough for that. The honor and the privilege of having been a part of that man's life, and to continue to be part of his family.